The ache was a permanent resident in Clara's chest. It had signed a long-term lease 2 years, 4 months, and 11 days ago, the afternoon Maya had first introduced her to Liam. It wasn't a sharp, insistent pain, not anymore. It had settled into something duller, a constant, low-grade thrumming that was simply part of her baseline existence, like the hum of the refrigerator or the distant sound of city traffic. It was the background noise to her life, a life that felt increasingly like it was being lived adjacent to the one she actually wanted. She had become an expert in the art of supportive friendship. She was a master of the encouraging nod, the sympathetic sigh, the perfectly timed, "You deserve so much better." She could listen for hours as Maya dissected the minutiae of her relationship with Liam, the arguments, the reconciliations, the silences that stretched into canyons between them. Clara would sit on her worn floral sofa, a mug of chamomile tea warming her hands, and offer carefully curated advice, each word a tiny betrayal of her own heart. The irony was a bitter pill she swallowed daily. Here she was, the secret archivist of every beautiful thing about Maya, the way a tiny constellation of freckles appeared on her nose in the summer, the specific, throaty sound of her laugh when she was genuinely amused, the determined set of her jaw when she was working on a difficult design project, and she was using that intimate knowledge to help Maya patch things up with a man who seemed to notice none of it. Tonight was another chapter in the same exhausting book. Maya was curled on the opposite end of the couch, her feet tucked under a plush gray blanket, her phone clutched in her hand. The screen cast a pale, anxious light on her face. "He just doesn't get it," Maya murmured, her thumb hovering over the screen, endlessly scrolling through a text conversation Clara couldn't see. "It's like we're speaking 2 different languages. I talk about connection, about feeling seen, and he talks about, I don't know, what we're having for dinner next Tuesday." Clara took a slow sip of her tea. The steam warmed her face. "Communication is hard," she offered, the words feeling worn and flimsy from overuse. It was her go-to platitude, a safe, neutral territory. "It shouldn't be this hard, should it?" Maya looked up, her wide, brown eyes searching Clara's for an answer. There were flecks of gold in them, Clara knew, that shimmered when the light hit them just right. Right now, they were just cloudy with frustration. "With your person? It should be easier. It should feel like coming home, not like a constant negotiation." A knife, small and exquisitely sharp, twisted in Clara's gut. "I could be your home," the thought screamed in the silent space of her mind. "I speak your language. I know every dialect, every nuance. I could listen to you talk about feeling seen for the rest of my life." Instead, she said, "Maybe you just need to explain it to him in a different way." Maya sighed, a sound of profound weariness that seemed to suck the air out of the room. She tossed her phone onto the cushion beside her. "I've tried all the ways. I'm running out of ways. Sometimes I feel like I'm playing a role. The good girlfriend. I make the right noises, I laugh at the right times, but inside, I just feel hollow." This was new. The usual complaints were about Liam's messiness or his inability to make a plan, but this was a crack in the very foundation. Clara felt a dangerous, treacherous surge of hope, a tiny, flickering flame in the vast darkness of her pining. She stamped it out immediately. It was cruel to hope for Maya's unhappiness, even if that unhappiness might, in some impossible, far-flung fantasy, lead her to Clara. "Everyone feels like that sometimes," Clara said, her voice softer than she intended. She wanted to reach out, to smooth the worried line between Maya's eyebrows, but she kept her hands wrapped tightly around her mug. Physical contact was a minefield. A casual brush of fingers could send a jolt through her entire system, leaving her buzzing for hours. A hug held a second too long could shatter her composure. She lived in a constant state of careful choreography, maintaining a precise, safe distance at all times. "Do you?" Maya asked, her gaze direct and unnervingly perceptive. "Do you ever feel like you're just going through the motions with someone?" Clara thought of the few disastrous dates she'd forced herself on over the past 2 years. Men who were perfectly nice, perfectly adequate, but who felt like strangers from a foreign land. She couldn't connect. The entire time, she had felt like a ghost, a translucent observer in her own life, her thoughts drifting back to Maya, to the easy comfort of their shared silence, the effortless rhythm of their friendship. Sometimes, she admitted, which was not a lie. Maya pulled her knees to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. The movement made the blanket slip, revealing her mismatched socks, one with avocados and one with cartoon cats. It was so quintessentially Maya that Clara felt another pang, a sweet, painful ache of affection. "I just want more," Maya whispered to the room. "I see these couples, and they just seem so in sync. Like they have this secret world that's just for them. Liam and I don't have a secret world. We just share an apartment." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken things. Clara could feel the weight of her own secret world, the one she inhabited alone, where every glance from Maya was analyzed, every word was treasured, every shared laugh was a symphony. It was a world built for two, with only one occupant. "You're a good friend, Clara," Maya said suddenly, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what I'd do without you." The words were meant to be a comfort, but they landed like stones. Friend. The word was a brand, a cage, a final, unbreachable wall. Clara forced a smile, a brittle thing she was sure looked as fake as it felt. "I'm always here for you," she said. And that was the truest, most painful sentence she had ever spoken. She would always be here, sitting on this couch, drinking this tea, listening to Maya talk about a man who would never understand the treasure he held in his hands. She was the keeper of the flame, destined only to watch its warmth, never to feel it on her own skin. The ache in her chest pulsed, a dull, familiar heartbeat reminding her of everything she had and everything she would never be allowed to want. The break, when it came, was not a dramatic explosion but a quiet, final crumbling. Maya had shown up at her door a week later, late on a Tuesday night, her face pale and tear-streaked, her overnight bag clutched in her hand like a shield. She hadn't needed to say a word. Clara had simply opened the door wider and let her in, the familiar ache in her chest sharpening into something more acute, a painful mix of sympathy for her friend and a terrible, selfish relief. For 3 days, Clara's apartment became a sanctuary. They existed in a bubble of soft blankets, endless cups of tea, and old movies that required no emotional investment. Clara cooked Maya's favorite foods, let her sleep in her bed while she took the lumpy sofa, and listened as Maya cycled through anger, grief, and a surprising, fragile sense of liberation. Liam was a ghost in their conversations, a name attached to a collection of hurts and disappointments. Clara was the perfect friend, the perfect caretaker, her own feelings locked away in a deep, hidden vault. It was on the 4th night that the world tilted on its axis. The rain was lashing against the windows, a furious, rhythmic drumming that insulated them from the rest of the world. They were on the sofa again, sharing a bowl of popcorn, the television murmuring in the background. The initial storm of Maya's breakup had passed, leaving behind a strange, contemplative quiet. "It's weird," Maya said, staring into the middle distance. "I thought I'd be more devastated. I am sad, but mostly I just feel quiet." "That's normal," Clara replied, her voice gentle. "It's a big change." Maya turned to look at her, her expression unreadable in the flickering blue light of the TV. "He told me I was asking for too much," she said softly. "That my idea of love was a fantasy. That I wanted some kind of impossible intimacy." Clara's heart clenched. "He's wrong," she said, with more force than she intended. "Wanting to be truly known by someone isn't a fantasy. It's the whole point." A small, sad smile touched Maya's lips. "See? You get it." "You always get it," she paused, picking at a loose thread on the blanket. "Maybe I've just been bad at this. At relationships with men." Clara held her breath. This was new territory. Uncharted. Dangerous. Maya continued, her voice dropping to a near whisper, as if she were confessing a secret she hadn't even admitted to herself yet. "They always feel off. Like I'm reading from a script. I do the things you're supposed to do, say the things you're supposed to say. But the feeling, the real, deep-down feeling isn't there." It's like I'm trying to solve a math problem when what I really want is to read a poem. The metaphor was so perfect, so Maya, that Clara felt a fresh wave of love for her, so powerful it was almost painful. Maybe you've just been with the wrong men, Clara managed to say, her throat tight. Maybe, Maya agreed, but her eyes were still fixed on Clara, a strange, searching light in them. Or maybe I've been looking in the wrong section of the library entirely. The air crackled. The sound of the rain, the TV, the city, it all faded away, leaving only the charged silence between them. Clara's heart began to hammer against her ribs, a frantic, panicked bird. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Maya laughed, a short, nervous puff of air. "I don't know. This is going to sound so stupid. Don't laugh." "I won't laugh," Clara promised, her hands gripping the edge of the sofa cushion. Maya took a deep breath. "It's just, I've never been with a woman. Never even kissed a woman. And I feel like, I don't know, like I'm missing a piece of my own puzzle. How can I know what I want if I've only ever tried one thing?" She looked down at her hands, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "It's probably just the breakup talking. I'm probably just confused." Clara's mind was a maelstrom. Hope, terror, disbelief, and a wild, surging want all crashed together. She couldn't form a coherent thought. And then Maya looked up, her gaze locking with Clara's, and delivered the sentence that shattered the world as Clara knew it. "This is going to be the weirdest thing I've ever asked," Maya said, her voice trembling slightly. "But if I wanted to, practice? Just to see what it felt like? Would you? Would you help me?" The question hung in the air between them, shimmering and alive. It was a bridge suddenly appearing over a chasm Clara had long accepted she would never cross. But it was a terrifying, fragile bridge, and she didn't know if it would hold her weight. To Maya, it was a hypothetical, a moment of post-breakup curiosity. A practice session. To Clara, it was everything. It was the culmination of 2.5 years of silent, hopeless longing. To say no would be the safe, sensible thing to do. It would preserve their friendship, protect her heart from the inevitable devastation of being a mere experiment. To say yes was to step off a cliff, not knowing if she would fly or fall. Practice? Clara echoed, the word feeling foreign and absurd on her tongue. Kissing, Maya clarified, her blush deepening. Just to know. So I'm not just wondering anymore. She looked so vulnerable, so earnest, her entire being focused on Clara's response. And in that moment, Clara knew she was going to fall. She had been falling for years. All that was left was to see what it felt like to finally hit the ground. She nodded, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. "Okay," she breathed. Yes. The single word was a lit match dropped into a pool of gasoline. The aftermath of her yes was an exercise in excruciating tension. The word hung in the air, electric and terrifying. Maya didn't move, her eyes wide with a mixture of relief and a dawning horror at what she had just asked. The comfortable space of their friendship had been irrevocably altered. A new, invisible geography was being drawn between them on the couch, full of treacherous mountains and dizzying drops. "Oh," Maya breathed, as if surprised Clara had actually agreed. "Okay. Wow. Okay." She ran a hand through her hair, a nervous gesture Clara had seen 1,000 times, but which now seemed charged with a new significance. "We don't have to. I mean, not now. It was a stupid idea." "Forget I said anything." She started to pull away, to retreat back to the safety of their old dynamic. "No," Clara said, the word coming out stronger than she expected. Her own courage surprised her. "It's okay." It was the biggest lie she had ever told. It was anything but okay. Her entire universe was contracting to this single point, this moment on the couch with the rain outside and the scent of popcorn and Maya's vanilla shampoo in the air. The silence stretched again, but this time it was different. It wasn't empty. It was filled with the thunder of Clara's heartbeat, with the unspoken question of what now? The late-night movie they had been ignoring played on, a meaningless flicker of light and sound in the periphery. Clara's mind raced, trying to build a fortress around her heart. "This is for her," she told herself. This is an experiment. A favor for a friend who is confused and hurting. It means nothing. Expect nothing. The mantra was a flimsy shield against the tidal wave of her own emotions. Maya slowly, hesitantly, shifted closer on the couch. The movement was barely an inch, but it felt like a seismic event. The space between their knees vanished. The heat from Maya's leg seeped through the thin fabric of Clara's pajama pants, a warm, branding pressure that made her skin tingle. Clara's breath hitched. She kept her eyes fixed on the television screen, watching actors she couldn't name say words she couldn't hear. "So, how does this work?" Maya whispered, her voice a fragile thread in the quiet room. Clara had to force herself to turn her head to meet Maya's gaze. The proximity was dizzying. She could see the faint trace of mascara smudged beneath Maya's eyes, the way her lower lip trembled almost imperceptibly. The vulnerability in her friend's face was disarming, cutting through Clara's own panic. For a moment, her role as the supportive friend took over. "There are no rules," Clara said, her voice surprisingly steady. She was an actress playing the part of someone calm, someone who wasn't currently combusting from the inside out. "You just do it." "Right," Maya said, nodding slowly. "Right. Just do it," but she didn't move. She just watched Clara, her eyes tracing the curve of Clara's cheek, the line of her jaw, before finally, inevitably, dropping to her lips. That glance was everything. It was a physical blow, knocking the air from Clara's lungs. It lasted only a second, maybe two, but in that fleeting moment, Clara saw a flicker of something that wasn't just curiosity. It was something deeper, something that looked terrifyingly like want. "You're imagining it," her rational mind screamed. "You're seeing what you want to see." Maya leaned in, her movements tentative, uncertain. She smelled of rain and vanilla and the faintest hint of salt from her earlier tears. Clara remained perfectly still, a statue carved from fear and longing. She told herself to breathe. In. Out. Her heart refused to listen, hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. This was it. The point of no return. Maya's hand came up, hovering in the space between them for a heart-stopping second before her fingers gently, so gently, brushed against Clara's cheek. The touch was electric. A wildfire of sensation erupted from that single point of contact, racing down Clara's spine, to the tips of her fingers, to the soles of her feet. It was 1,000 times more potent than any accidental brush or friendly hug had ever been. This was different. This was deliberate. Her eyes fluttered shut of their own accord. She couldn't watch. It was too much, too intimate. She could only feel the feather-like caress of Maya's thumb stroking her cheekbone, the warmth of her breath as she moved closer, the soft rustle of fabric as their bodies shifted. The first touch of their lips was impossibly soft. It wasn't a kiss, not really. It was a question. A gentle, hesitant pressure, a testing of the waters. Maya's lips were warm and unsure against hers. For a moment, that was all it was. A silent, breathless acknowledgement. Then, something shifted. A tiny, almost inaudible sound escaped Maya's throat, a soft sigh of discovery. Her hand, which had been resting on Clara's cheek, slid into her hair, her fingers tangling in the strands at the nape of her neck. The gentle pressure sent a fresh shiver through Clara. The kiss deepened. It was no longer a question, but the beginning of an answer. Clara's carefully constructed walls crumbled into dust. The mantra of it means nothing evaporated. Her own hands, which had been clenched into fists in her lap, came up to rest on Maya's waist, her fingers gripping the soft fabric of her sweatshirt. She kissed her back, all the years of repressed feelings pouring into the single, desperate motion. It was a kiss of relief, of grief, of a love so profound it hurt. It was slow and deep and searching. It was nothing like the frantic, clumsy kisses Clara had experienced on her few and far between dates. This felt like a conversation, a story unfolding between them without a single word. Maya tasted of salt and popcorn and something uniquely her, a flavor Clara knew she would spend the rest of her life trying to name. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathless. They didn't move away. Their foreheads rested against each other, their noses almost touching. Clara kept her eyes closed, trying to commit every single sensation to memory. The feeling of Maya's fingers in her hair, the lingering warmth on her lips, the sound of their ragged breaths mingling in the small space between them. "Oh," Maya whispered, the word a puff of warm air against Clara's skin. It wasn't a word of surprise or confusion. It sounded like a word of recognition. Like finding something you didn't even know you had been searching for. Clara slowly opened her eyes. Maya's were already open, inches from hers, dark and wide and swimming with an emotion Clara couldn't decipher. The gold flecks were shimmering now, catching the light from the television. Clara's heart, which had been racing, began to ache with a new, more terrifying feeling: hope. A real, substantial hope that felt like a fragile, beautiful bird taking flight in her chest. "So," Clara managed to say, her voice husky, "was that enough practice?" A slow smile spread across Maya's face, a genuine, dazzling smile that made the corners of her eyes crinkle. It was a smile Clara had not seen in months. "No," Maya whispered, her smile not faltering as she leaned in again. "I think I'm going to need a lot more practice." And as their lips met for the second time, the kiss was no longer hesitant or uncertain. It was sure. It was deliberate. It felt, to Clara's astonishment, like coming home. The days that followed were a strange and beautiful fever dream. The line they had crossed that rainy night was not a temporary boundary breached, but a permanent relocation. They had moved into a new country together, and they were learning its language, one whispered conversation, one lingering touch, one stolen kiss at a time. The word practice was never spoken again. It had served its purpose as a key, unlocking a door neither of them had known was there. Now that they were through it, the pretense seemed absurd. Clara felt like she was breathing for the first time in years. The dull ache in her chest, the constant companion of her unrequited love, had vanished. In its place was a vibrant, thrumming aliveness, a nervous energy that was equal parts terror and exhilaration. She was terrified of waking up, of this being some elaborate dream. But every morning, she would open her eyes to find Maya there, still asleep in her bed, her hair a wild tangle on the pillow, and the reality of it would wash over her anew. Maya had not gone back to her and Liam's old apartment, except for one swift, silent trip with Clara in tow to retrieve her most essential belongings. The rest of her life was packed into boxes in a storage unit, a physical manifestation of the past she was leaving behind. Her presence had completely transformed Clara's small, quiet apartment. It was filled with the scent of her perfume, the clutter of her art supplies on the kitchen table, the sound of her humming along to the radio in the morning. It was brighter, warmer, more alive. It felt like a home in a way it never had before. They talked. For hours. They lay on the couch, their legs tangled together, or sat cross-legged on the floor in the patch of afternoon sun that streamed through the living room window, and they dismantled and reassembled everything they thought they knew about themselves and each other. "I feel so stupid," Maya confessed one afternoon, her head resting in Clara's lap as Clara idly traced patterns on her arm. "How did I not know? How did I live for 26 years and not understand this fundamental thing about myself?" "You're not stupid," Clara said softly, her fingers brushing over the soft skin of Maya's inner elbow, sending a pleasant shiver through her. "You were just following the map you were given. We all are. It doesn't always occur to you to question if it's leading you to the right place." "But you knew," Maya said, turning her head to look up at her. Her gaze was intense, searching. "About yourself, I mean." Clara hesitated. "I've known for a long time. It wasn't a big revelation for me. It was just a fact. Like having blue eyes." "And you never said anything," Maya murmured, a hint of wonder in her voice. "All those times I was crying on your shoulder about Liam. You were just sitting there, listening. How did you do that?" The question was a direct hit. Clara's hand stilled on Maya's arm. The memory of that specific pain was still sharp. "It was hard," she admitted, her voice quiet. "It was. Really hard. I just wanted you to be happy. And I thought he was what made you happy." "He wasn't," Maya said, her voice firm with a newfound certainty. "He was what I thought should make me happy. It's different, she sat up, her expression serious. I think I was measuring him against you the whole time, and I didn't even realize it. Clara's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? I mean, I would get frustrated with him because he didn't listen in that way you do, where you hear the things I'm not even saying. I would get angry because he didn't know that I hate the texture of coconut or that my favorite color changes with the seasons. He didn't know the real me. He knew the good girlfriend version. She reached out and took Clara's hand, her fingers intertwining with hers. The fit was perfect. You know the real me. You always have. And every time he failed one of those secret tests, every time he came up short. I think I was really just wishing he was more like you. The confession settled over Clara, a warm, heavy blanket of validation. All the years of feeling like a ghost in her own life, of being the supportive friend on the sidelines, it had all been seen. It had all meant something. I was in love with you, Maya, Clara whispered, the words finally being spoken aloud. They felt both monumental and incredibly simple. For years. Tears welled in Maya's eyes, shimmering but not falling. I think, she said, her voice thick with emotion, I think I was in love with you too. I just didn't have the right words for it. The physical intimacy between them escalated with a natural, unforced rhythm. It was a language they were both fluent in, even if they were just now allowing themselves to speak it. It was in the way Maya would now unconsciously reach for Clara's hand when they were walking down the street. It was in the long, lingering hugs in the morning before Clara left for work. It was in the soft, sleepy kisses they shared before turning off the light at night. One evening, Clara was at the stove, stirring a pot of tomato sauce, when she felt Maya's arms slide around her waist from behind. Maya rested her chin on Clara's shoulder, her body pressing against hers. The simple, domestic gesture was more intimate than anything Clara had ever experienced. Smells good, Maya murmured into her neck, her breath warm against Clara's skin. It's just pasta, Clara said, her voice a little shaky. She leaned back into the embrace, her whole body relaxing into Maya's hold. It felt safe. It felt right. Everything feels better with you here, Clara confessed, turning her head slightly to look at Maya. Good, Maya said, pressing a soft kiss to Clara's temple. Because I'm not planning on going anywhere. These moments were the building blocks of their new reality. Each one was a small, perfect brick, laying the foundation for something solid, something real. But even amidst the dizzying happiness, a small, persistent thread of anxiety ran through Clara. It was all so new, so fragile. She had wanted this for so long that now that she had it, she was terrified of it breaking. She would watch Maya sometimes when she was sketching at the table, her face a mask of concentration, and a wave of insecurity would wash over her. Was this real? Was this just a rebound, a phase of experimentation for Maya that would eventually end, leaving Clara shattered in its wake? She never voiced these fears. She didn't want to taint their perfect bubble with her own anxieties. She just held on tighter, loved a little harder, and prayed that this new, beautiful country they had found together was a place they could both call home, forever. The escalation of their intimacy was more than just physical. It was an emotional fusion, a weaving together of two lives that had been running parallel for years, and the sheer beauty of the emerging pattern was enough to take Clara's breath away, even as it terrified her. The idyllic bubble, as perfect as it was, could not remain impervious to the outside world forever. The past had a way of knocking, and eventually, Clara knew they would have to answer the door. The first knock came in the form of a text message on Maya's phone. They were curled up on the sofa, watching a documentary about deep sea life, when Maya's phone, lying face down on the coffee table, buzzed insistently. Once, twice, a third time. A flicker of the old tension returned to the room. Clara felt it instantly, a subtle drop in temperature. Maya ignored it at first, her eyes fixed on the screen where a bioluminescent jellyfish pulsed in the dark. But the fourth buzz was impossible to ignore. With a sigh, Maya reached for the phone. Clara pretended to be engrossed in the documentary, but her entire being was attuned to Maya. She watched from the corner of her eye as Maya's expression tightened, the soft lines of her face hardening as she read the messages. It was Liam. Of course it was Liam. He wants to talk, Maya said, her voice flat. She didn't look at Clara. Clara's carefully constructed piece began to fray at the edges. About what? She asked, striving to keep her tone neutral. The usual, Maya said, tossing the phone back onto the table with a clatter. How he's made a mistake, how he understands now, how he's willing to work on things. The same things he said after every fight. She let out a humorless laugh. It's amazing how much a man can understand once you're gone. The words were dismissive, but Clara could see the conflict in her eyes. 2 years was a long time. A shared life, even an unhappy one, grew deep roots that couldn't be pulled up without causing damage. What are you going to do? Clara asked, her heart beginning to beat a little faster. This was the test. The moment she had been dreading. Maya was silent for a long time, her gaze distant. Clara's anxiety swelled, filling the space between them. The what-ifs began to scream in her head. What if she's having second thoughts? What if this was all just a reaction to the breakup? What if she goes back to him? The thought was a physical pain, a sharp, cold dread that settled in her stomach. She had just found this happiness. The idea of it being snatched away was unbearable. She started to pull away, a subconscious, self-protective retreat. The warmth between their bodies on the couch suddenly felt precarious. Maya seemed to sense the shift. She turned, her eyes finally meeting Clara's. She saw the fear there, the insecurity Clara was trying so hard to hide. Clara, she said, her voice soft but firm. Look at me. Clara forced herself to meet her gaze. There is nothing he can say that will change this, Maya said, gesturing to the space between them, to the apartment, to the new life they were building. Going back to him would be like trying to live in a house where the foundation is cracked. I spent 2 years trying to convince myself the cracks weren't that bad. But they were. And now she reached out, her hand covering Clara's. Now I know what it feels like to be in a house that's solid. That's safe. The relief that washed over Clara was so immense it left her weak. But the fear had opened a door to her own insecurities, and she couldn't seem to close it. In the following days, she found herself pulling back, ever so slightly. She became quieter, more watchful. She would initiate fewer kisses, hold her hugs for a fraction of a second less. It was a subconscious act of self-preservation. If she didn't let herself have all of it, maybe it wouldn't hurt as much if it was taken away. Maya noticed. Of course she noticed. She was attuned to Clara's every mood. The confrontation came a few nights later. Clara was at the sink washing dishes, her back to the room. She was lost in her own anxious thoughts when Maya came up behind her and gently turned off the water. Okay, Maya said, her voice calm but insistent. Talk to me. It's nothing, Clara deflected, turning the water back on. I'm just tired. Maya turned it off again. She took the sponge from Clara's hand and placed it on the counter. Then she took both of Clara's hands in hers, her grip warm and steady. No, something is wrong. You've been distant. For days. You've been hiding from me, and I want to know why. The directness of the question left Clara with nowhere to hide. The suds on her hands began to drip onto the floor. She looked down at their joined hands, unable to meet Maya's eyes. I'm scared, she whispered, the admission costing her more than she could have imagined. Scared of what? Maya prompted gently, her thumb stroking the backs of Clara's hands. Of this, Clara said, her voice trembling. Of all of this. It's too good, Maya. I waited for this for so long, and now that it's here, I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. I keep waiting for you to wake up one morning and realize this was all a mistake, a fun experiment after a bad breakup. And that you want to go back to your real life. The words tumbled out, a torrent of all her hidden fears. When she was done, she finally risked a glance at Maya's face. She expected to see pity, maybe even frustration. Instead, she saw a profound, aching tenderness. Clara, Maya said, her voice thick with an emotion Clara couldn't name. My real life? This is my real life. The other life, the one with Liam. That was the mistake. That was me playing a part. With you, I'm not playing a part. I'm just me. For the first time, maybe ever. She let go of one of Clara's hands to cup her cheek, her touch gentle but firm, forcing Clara to look at her. "I've been thinking a lot," she continued, her voice dropping lower. "About that first night. About kissing you." Clara's breath caught in her throat. "I told myself it was about curiosity. I told myself it was about figuring out if I might not be as straight as I thought. And maybe that was part of it." At first, her thumb stroked Clara's cheekbone, a soothing, hypnotic rhythm. "But that wasn't the real reason. The real reason, I think, is that I've been wanting to kiss you for a very, very long time. I just didn't let myself know it." The pre-confession hung in the air, a beautiful, fragile truth. It was everything Clara needed to hear, a balm on the raw, open wound of her insecurity. "My entire relationship with Liam," Maya said, her eyes never leaving Clara's, "was me trying to force a puzzle piece into a space where it didn't fit. I kept trying to shave down the edges to make it work because I thought it was the piece I was supposed to have. But it never felt right. Kissing you. That felt like finding the piece that was missing all along. It just clicked." Tears welled in Clara's eyes, tears of relief and a deep, soul-shaking joy. All her fears, all her anxieties, seemed so small and foolish in the face of Maya's unwavering certainty. "So please," Maya whispered, her forehead now resting against Clara's. "Stop hiding from me. Don't pull away. We're in this together. You and me." "Okay," Clara whispered back, the word thick with unshed tears. "Okay." She leaned in and kissed her, a kiss that was not about passion or practice, but about reassurance. It was a promise. It was a sealing of the truth that had finally been spoken aloud in the quiet of their kitchen, with the scent of soap and leftover pasta in the air. The point of no return had passed long ago. This was something new. This was the point of no going back. And for the first time, Clara truly believed it. The kitchen, with its soft lighting and the lingering scent of dinner, transformed into a sanctuary. The fears Clara had harbored, the ones that made her retreat into herself, had been named and gently dismantled by Maya's words. It was as if a storm she had been bracing for had finally broken, and instead of destruction, it brought a cleansing rain, clearing the air and leaving everything fresh and new. Maya's hands were still framing her face, her thumbs gently wiping away the tears that had escaped and traced paths down Clara's cheeks. The tenderness in the gesture was overwhelming. For so long, Clara had been the strong one, the supporter, the steadfast shoulder for Maya to cry on. To be the one receiving such profound, gentle care felt like a revelation. "I'm sorry," Clara whispered, her voice still shaky. "I didn't mean to pull away. I got lost in my own head." "Don't be sorry," Maya murmured, her lips brushing against Clara's temple. "We both have things to unlearn. I have to unlearn how to perform in a relationship, and you have to unlearn how to expect the worst. We can teach each other." The simplicity and wisdom of it struck Clara to her core. It wasn't about one of them being broken and the other being the healer. It was about two people meeting in the middle of their own beautiful, complicated messes and agreeing to figure it out together. "I love you, Clara," Maya said, the words spoken clearly and without a trace of hesitation. It wasn't a pre-confession anymore. It was the full, unvarnished truth, laid bare between them. "I know that now. I think, on some level, I've known it for a very long time. I was just too scared to look at it directly. Loving you felt big and terrifying. It felt like it would change everything." "It did change everything," Clara breathed, a watery laugh escaping her. "Yeah," Maya said, a slow, radiant smile spreading across her face. "It did. And it's the best thing that's ever happened to me." And then it was Clara's turn. The words she had kept locked in her heart for 2 years, for months, and what felt like a lifetime, finally broke free. "I've been in love with you since the day you told me that long, ridiculous story about trying to bake a cake for your brother's birthday and setting off the fire alarm. You had flour on your nose, and you were so animated and funny, and my heart just gave up. It was yours from that moment on." The specificity of the memory made Maya's eyes shine. "I remember that," she whispered. "You laughed so hard you snorted." "I did," Clara admitted, a real, genuine laugh bubbling up from her chest. "And you didn't make fun of me for it. Why would I make fun of the most wonderful sound I'd ever heard? Maya asked, her expression so earnest it made Clara's heart ache in the best possible way. The space between them was humming with all the things that had finally been said. The air was thick with love and relief. It felt sacred. Can I kiss you? Maya asked, her voice dropping to a whisper, even though they were only inches apart. The question was a courtesy, a sign of respect for the emotional journey they had just taken. She wasn't assuming anything. She was asking for permission to enter this new, fully honest space with her. Yes, Clara breathed, the answer a certainty, a prayer. Please. The kiss that followed was the culmination of everything. It was different from their first tentative, questioning kiss on the couch. It was different from the passionate, searching kisses of their first few days together. This one was something else entirely. It was a kiss of profound understanding. It began with a softness, a gentle meeting of lips that was more about connection than passion. It was a silent affirmation of everything they had just confessed. Clara's hands came up to rest on Maya's shoulders, while Maya's hands slid from her face down to her waist, pulling her closer until there was no space left between them. They were flush against each other, two halves of a whole finally clicking into place. Then, the kiss deepened. It became more certain, more urgent, as the last vestiges of fear and insecurity melted away in the heat between them. It was a conversation, a story, a promise. It spoke of rainy nights and years of longing, of supportive friendship and secret hopes. It spoke of a future that had, until recently, seemed impossible. Clara poured all of her love, all of her patience, all of her devotion into it, and she felt Maya meet her with an equal, astonishing force. Maya's love was newer, a startling, brilliant sunrise, but it was just as powerful. When they finally, reluctantly, broke apart, they were both breathing heavily, their chests rising and falling in unison. Maya rested her forehead against Clara's, her eyes closed. Clara could feel the frantic, happy beat of Maya's heart against her own. Wow, Maya breathed out, the word filled with wonder. Yeah, Clara agreed, her voice husky. That felt, Maya started, searching for the word. Right, Clara finished for her. It felt right. So right, Maya confirmed, opening her eyes. The gold flecks were practically incandescent. I'm never letting you go. You know that, right? Then we're both exactly where we need to be, Clara said, a feeling of absolute peace settling over her. The ache was gone. The fear was gone. In their place was a quiet, solid certainty. This was real. This was happening. After years of watching from the wings, she was finally on the stage, in the light, and the leading lady was looking at her as if she were the only person in the world. It was more than she had ever dared to dream of. It was home. In the immediate aftermath of the kiss, a new kind of silence descended, but it was a comfortable, settled one. The air, once charged with unspoken confessions and anxieties, was now calm and clear. They stood in the kitchen, wrapped in each other's arms, swaying slightly as if to a song only they could hear. The suds on the floor were forgotten. The rest of the world was forgotten. It was Maya who spoke first, her voice a soft murmur against Clara's hair. I'm terrified. The admission, coming on the heels of such certainty, should have startled Clara. Instead, it felt like the most honest thing in the world. She pulled back just enough to see Maya's face. There was no doubt there, no regret. Just a wide-eyed wonder mixed with a healthy dose of awe at the magnitude of what they had just unlocked. Me too, Clara confessed, and the shared fear was not a wedge but a bond. I'm absolutely, completely terrified. It's just Maya struggled to articulate the thought. This is real. This isn't a fantasy or a what-if anymore. We have to navigate this. In the real world. The real world. The phrase brought with it the thought of Liam, of their mutual friends who only knew them as platonic best friends, of Maya's family who had known and liked her boyfriend. The simple, perfect bubble of Clara's apartment suddenly felt very fragile again, not because of their feelings for each other, but because of everything that existed outside of it. We will, Clara said, her voice more confident than she felt. She was drawing on her old role as the supporter, but now it was for them, for their shared future. We'll figure it out. One day at a time. One day at a time, Maya repeated, like a mantra. Okay, I can do that. She took a deep breath. First step, I need to officially, finally, end it with Liam. Not over text. Face to face. He deserves that. Clara's heart did a small, nervous flip, but she nodded. You're right. He does. And I need to tell him why, Maya continued, her gaze fixed on Clara. I need to be honest. Not just for him, but for me. For us. I'm done hiding and pretending. The thought of Maya telling Liam about her was both thrilling and petrifying. It made everything undeniably real. Permanent. They spent the rest of the evening talking, not about their feelings anymore, but about logistics. It was the practical, unglamorous side of blowing up your life and starting a new one. They made a plan for Maya to meet Liam for coffee the next day in a neutral public place. They talked about how to tell their friends. They were a team, a unit, making decisions together. As they got ready for bed, a thought that had been percolating in Maya's mind finally surfaced. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, watching Clara pull a soft t-shirt over her head. You know, Maya began, her tone contemplative, all those advice columns and magazines, they talk about what love is supposed to feel like. Butterflies, fireworks, all of that. Clara sat down beside her. And I had some of that with Liam at the beginning. The excitement, the newness. But it faded. And what was left was work. It was effort. It felt like trying to keep a fire going with damp wood. She looked at Clara, her expression full of a dawning realization. With you, even when we were just friends, it was never work. It was easy. Being with you, talking to you. It felt like sitting in the sun. It was just warm. And I was so used to that warmth that I took it for granted. I thought it was just friendship. I didn't realize that was the actual fire. The real one. Everyone else I dated, I was just trying to build a pale imitation of the fire I already had with you. This recontextualization of their past was a revelation for both of them. It wasn't that Maya had suddenly developed feelings for Clara. It was that she had finally recognized what her feelings had been all along. The years of their friendship were not a prequel to their love story. They were the story itself, and this was just the chapter where both characters finally understood the plot. I was measuring every relationship against what I had with you, Maya said, the words a quiet echo of her earlier sentiment, now imbued with a deeper understanding. And they all came up short. I just thought my standards were too high. I didn't realize my standards were you. Clara felt the last of her insecurities dissolve. It wasn't a rebound. It wasn't an experiment. It was an inevitability. She took Maya's hand. So, what do we do now? She asked, the question encompassing everything Liam, their friends, their terrifying, beautiful future. Maya brought Clara's hand to her lips and kissed her knuckles. Now, she said, her eyes glinting with a resolve Clara had never seen before. We stop being scared. We stop hiding. And we just are. It was a decision. A conscious choice to step out of the shadows of what was safe and expected and into the light of what was true and right. They were scared, yes, but they were scared together. And as they lay down to sleep that night, curled around each other, Clara knew that as long as they were together, they could face whatever came next. The fear was just a fog, and for the first time, she could clearly see the path ahead. 3 months later, the world was a different color. The muted grays and blues of Clara's old life had been replaced with a vibrant, sun-drenched palette. The fear that had felt so monumental in the beginning had receded, becoming a faint, distant echo. It was still there, a reminder of how much she had to lose, but it was dwarfed by the overwhelming, solid presence of her happiness. Their apartment, it was unequivocally their apartment now, was a testament to their new life. Maya's canvases were stacked against one wall, a riot of color and bold strokes. Her half-finished mugs of tea were a common sight on the coffee table, right next to Clara's neat stacks of books. They had fallen into a rhythm that was as comfortable and natural as breathing. Clara would wake first, her body already accustomed to the weight of Maya's arms slung over her waist. She would slip out of bed to make coffee, and the rich, dark scent would be the thing that finally coaxed Maya from sleep. The conversation with Liam had happened. It had been hard and messy, as all such endings are. Maya had come home pale and drained, but with a look of profound relief on her face. She had been honest, and he had been, to her surprise, mostly understanding. Hurt, yes, but understanding. He had seen how unhappy she'd been. He just hadn't known the reason. His chapter in their lives was officially, finally closed. Telling their friends had been a different kind of challenge, met with a spectrum of reactions from stunned silence to squeals of "I knew it." But in the end, those who mattered saw what Clara and Maya already knew, that this made a fundamental kind of sense. Seeing them together was not like seeing two friends who had suddenly become a couple. It was like seeing a picture that had always been slightly out of focus finally snap into sharp, clear relief. This morning, a lazy Saturday, was a perfect distillation of their new normal. Sunlight streamed through the large living room window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Clara was on the sofa, a book open in her lap, though she hadn't turned a page in 10 minutes. She was too busy watching Maya. Maya was on the floor, surrounded by sketch pads and charcoal pencils, a smudge of black decorating her cheek. She was completely absorbed in her work, her brow furrowed in concentration, her lower lip caught between her teeth. She was drawing the view from their window, the familiar cityscape of rooftops and water towers, but she was rendering it with a life and energy that was new. Her art, like everything else about her, had blossomed. Without looking up, Maya spoke. "You're staring." "I'm admiring," Clara corrected, a soft smile on her face. "There's a difference." Maya glanced up, her eyes bright. "Oh yeah? What's the difference?" "Staring is rude," Clara said, closing her book and setting it aside. "Admiring is what you do when you're so ridiculously in love with someone you can't quite believe they're real and you have to keep checking." A lovely blush spread across Maya's cheeks, dusting over the charcoal smudge. "Smooth," she said, but her smile was wide and genuine. She put down her pencil and crawled over to the sofa, tucking herself under Clara's arm and resting her head on her shoulder. "I like being admired by you." "Good," Clara said, pressing a kiss into her tangled hair. It smelled like vanilla and turpentine, a combination that had become the scent of home. They sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, watching the sunlight move across the floor. "Do you ever miss it?" Clara asked quietly, the question coming out of nowhere. "Miss what?" Maya asked, her voice sleepy. "Liam? God, no. Not even a little bit." "No," Clara clarified. "I mean, the before. The simplicity of it. When we were just friends and everything was easier. Less complicated." It was a fleeting, foolish thought, but it was one that occasionally crossed her mind. Maya shifted, lifting her head to look Clara in the eye. Her expression was serious. "Easier?" "Clara, it wasn't easier. It was harder. I was walking around with this giant hole in my life, trying to fill it with things that didn't fit. I was lonely, even when I was sitting next to someone who supposedly loved me." "This," she said, her hand coming up to cup Clara's jaw, her thumb stroking her cheek, "this is the easiest thing in the world. Being with you isn't complicated. It's the only thing that's ever been simple." The sincerity in her voice erased the last shadow of a doubt in Clara's mind. She had spent so long pining for a fantasy, a version of Maya she thought she could never have. But the reality was infinitely better. It was messy and real and complicated on the outside, but at its core, it was profoundly, beautifully simple. Sometimes, the most frightening dares led to the most beautiful discoveries. Maya asking her to practice kissing had been a dare to them both, a dare to step outside the neat lines they had drawn for their lives and explore the wild, uncharted territory of what could be. Clara had been so afraid of losing her best friend, but in taking that dare, she hadn't lost her. She had found her in a way she never thought possible. "I love you," Clara whispered, the words as easy and natural as breathing now. "I love you, too," Maya whispered back, leaning in to kiss her. The kiss was soft and sure, a quiet promise in the sunlit room. It wasn't a question or a confession or a discovery anymore. It was a statement. A fact. like having blue eyes, or the sun rising in the east, or two people finding their way home to each other, finally, after a long and winding journey. It was just the way things were meant to be.